The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the Church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. That's reading 580 by Mark Morrison Reed. Dolores will light the chalice here in the sanctuary. Those of you at home are invited to light your own chalice now. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see there is communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. That was reading 435 by Kathleen McTeague. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind our online participants to leave yourselves muted. However, we want you and whoever is with you to sing as big and loud as you like. Make it a joyous experience. Please stand in body or spirit and sing the opening hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of Cambria. We're glad you've joined us today. Our UUCC sanctuary sits on land that the Salinan and Chumash indigenous peoples historically inhabited. We honor their contribution to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to gather in faith on their unceded territory. Let us respect their legacy and protect their history as we occupy this sacred space. As Unitarian Universalists, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation run by the democratic process. We invite speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds to speak at our pulpit. We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest that connect with the UU 7 principles. Today's service centers around the fifth principle. We affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. My name is Andy Fagan, and I am pleased to be your worship associate for this morning's service. I'd like to extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We're glad you joined us this morning. If you wish, please raise your hand and introduce yourself or your guest. Anybody want to say hi? Well, if you're welcome to all. If you're not on the mailing list, please visit the UUCC website at uuccambria.org so that we can keep you informed about all our activities. Members and friends, please check out what's happening, the e-blast sent to you every week. This is a great way to keep up to date with our latest news. And if you wish to see this or any of the past Zoom services, the recordings can be found on the UUCC website and on Facebook. So again, good morning and welcome to everyone. The affirmation is both a recognition of the nature of this community as well as a promise to which we aspire. Let us now recite the UUCC affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. We set aside this time for brief announcements that will be of interest to our community and friends. Please be succinct when announcing upcoming events or updates to UUCC-related policies. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand. When Randy or I call on you, come up to the podium or unmute yourself and then speak. Randy, why don't you start us off? It's on top, right there too.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good morning. These same two announcements as last week. Again, this August, we're going to have our Summer Sermons by Other People series. And so far I have 2 people have signed up and I'd like to get a couple more. So if you're interested and you can find a sermon that speaks to you so you can share it with us, that'd be fantastic. So let me know as soon as you can about that. Okay, and the next is September 28th. Yeah, that's it. We're going to have our 3rd annual service auction. So be thinking about a service that you can actually provide that we can auction off. And this is not so much that we need to have a fundraiser, but it's just fun to get together and do an event like this. So that's why we're doing it. So anyway, the service auction for August, be thinking about a service you can, for September, think of the service you can provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Jan.
I have 2 announcements. One is that as head of the scholarship committee, we have met our goal. Yay, you're off the hook. And pencil in June 2nd for our scholarship service. It's going to be really special. We'll have all the candidates, all the recipients here. And from the high school, we have Samantha Brosette coming to speak to us. And from Leffingwell, we have Justin Gish. They are the head of the departments that run this scholarship program. So we're lucky to have them. My second announcement is, and I'm doing this for Wayne and Sue and everybody else, they're at the event, so are a lot of other people, I guess, setting up for green space because tomorrow is Earth Day. And I'm going to speak on the behalf of President Joe Biden. Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2024 as Earth Day. Today, I encourage all Americans to reflect on the need to protect our precious planet, to heed the call to combat our climate and biodiversity crises while growing the economy, and to keep working for a healthier, safer, more equitable future for all. Amen.
Thank you, Jan. Anyone else here in the sanctuary? I have One announcement, a reminder that this Wednesday, being the last Wednesday of the month, our book conversation group will meet here at 4 p.m. Wednesday to continue our discussion of the Handbook of Unitarian Universalism, the Pocket Guide to Unitarian Universalism. Those discussions have been very rewarding. I think we're up to we're in several chapters in and several to go. So we'd love to have you join us. No homework necessary. Just come. We'll read the text out loud and then discuss it. 4 o'clock this Wednesday. Randy, anybody online?
No hands here. Back to
No
you, Andy.
hands online. Okay, next week, Rebecca Hendricks will read Why Do the Wicked Prosper? Why Do the Treacherous Thrive? By Reverend Craig Roshhaven. Joys and Concerns is a time for sharing personal celebrations, sorrows, reflections, or gratitude. This is a time for community building. Please exercise brevity. This sacred moment should not be used to sermonize. Thank you. If you wish to share, simply come forward, light a candle, place it in the vessel, stand on the asterisk to my left, and then speak. For our remote participants, please raise your Zoom hand. I'm actually going to start. I like this candle. This could have been an announcement, but I decided to put it into Joys and Concerns. Starting Monday at sunset, Jewish people all around the world begin celebrating Passover. That's a celebration of the release from slavery of the Jewish people thousands of years ago, as led by Moses. You know the story. It's been celebrated for millennia, many millennia, and this year it's particularly troubling, difficult to be celebrating that given the situation in the Middle East. The events of October 7th, hostages still being held, about tens of thousands of people dead from that conflict. It's with heavy hearts that folks will be celebrating beginning Monday evening. But we pray for better times. There have been many good times and bad times, and better times will come.
It is with a certain amount of joy that or at least hope, that I raise this candle in the hopes both in your concerns to be answered with a solution to the world's problems by the governing body of the world, the United Nations. And one thing that should happen to it, I think, is something that we can do for it. Rescind the veto vote of the United States. I am hopeful for this.
Asterisk. Okay, my name is Kelly. I turned on the radio this morning and the DJ said, well, I hope you have a chair and a blanket and are looking out the window at a nice sunny day. And it was amazing. I was sitting in my own chair for the first time in 7 years and had gotten a blanket that was my daughter's blanket. It's only about this big, but it's very warm. And I was right next to the window. And there were a couple other things on that radio show that were quite coincidental, but the shipping pod arrived at my house Friday. An amazing man managed to place it on the angled driveway despite all the oak trees. And it got emptied out yesterday. So this morning I had my table and chairs and blanket, and it happened to be sunny. So I celebrate kind of actually being here after having had a house with a cot and my camp chair for 2 months. So
Candle of deep concern for my son and his family, 3 kids. Just keep them in your thoughts. Thank you.
The asterisk. I have a candle of concern. My sister-in-law Mara is having open heart surgery, and I just want to wish her the best of luck. And I also want to thank Andy for bringing up Passover. I want to share that joy with the congregation, and you did it very well. So thank you very much, and thank you. Thank you. I'm getting signals in the back.
No, that's great. I'm for you. Both.
You know, I have another one. This is nothing, pure joy. Our grandson Liam turned 1 month on Friday. Randy, anybody online?
No hands. Back to you, Andy.
The collective flames of these candles embody all the joys and concerns which may have gone unspoken today, but are deeply felt in this community. Our first reading is an excerpt from the 7 Principles in Word and Worship, Chapter 5, by Reverend Parissa Parsa. In our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience. A belief that such development is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We could call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, democracy means not I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. Everyone who has lived with other people knows that we can commit to a community and then find ourselves at odds with the community's decisions. In a healthy community, each individual among us should occasionally be in the minority. The experience promotes spiritual growth, maturity, and a deepened understanding of the cost and the rewards of community. Let us join in a time of meditation, of prayer and of silence. Let us seek the quiet and the calm, laying aside our struggles. And in the silence, may there be a reverence in our hearts, a thankfulness within our spirit, and a deepened understanding of the meaning of our lives. Let us enter the stillness. In this familiar place, listen to the sounds of breathing, creaking chairs, shuffling feet, clearing throats, and sighing all around. Know that each breath, movement, the glance meant for you or intercepted, holds a life within it. Find the silence among these people and listen to it all. Breathing, sighs, movement, holding back. Hear the tears that have not yet reached their eyes. Perhaps they are your own. Hear also the laughter, building deep where joy abides despite everything. Listen, rejoice, and say Amen. That prayer by Barbara Pescan. For our second reading, we have a quick civics lesson with excerpts from the Cambria Community Services District website, cambriacsd.org. The CCSD vision statement. Our vision is to serve our community by delivering sustainable, cost-effective services while practicing environmental stewardship and preserving the unique charm and atmosphere that make Cambria special. History. The Moonstone Cove CSD was formed originally in 1966 and expanded in 1976 following a reorganization that dissolved Cambria County Water District, formed in 1959, Cambria Fire Protection District, originally formed as Hope Volunteer Fire, formed in 1877 and changed to Cambria Fire in 1933. Cambria Garbage Disposal District, formed in 1959. Cambria Lighting District, formed in 1959. And County Service Area Number 6, which took over the Lighting District in 1967. In 1976, the Cambria Community Services District was formed. This facilitated the expansion of CCSD services to include water, wastewater, fire protection, lighting, refuse, and parks, recreation, and open space. The CC is governed by a 5-member board of directors elected by Cambria voters for 4-year overlapping terms. End of civics lesson. Please stand in body or spirit and sing Our World is One World, number 134. Today, we are privileged to have a conversation with CCSD General Manager Matthew McElheine. Matthew was born in Fresno, California. He moved to San Luis Obispo County in 1997 to attend Cal Poly. His extensive academic credentials include the degrees in kinesiology from Cal Poly and Cuesta College, a Doctor of Public Administration from California Baptist University, an MS in Public Safety Administration from Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois. His public service career includes San Luis and Cambria Ambulance Corps, firefighter paramedic with Selma Fire Department in Selma, California, engineer paramedic for the state of California and the U.S. Department of Defense, and field training officer at Hartnell College. Matthew and his wife Melissa are raising 4 children and live in Arroyo Grande. Please join me in welcoming Matthew McElheine. Thank you for being with us this morning. We really appreciate you taking the time. So one of my favorite interviewers, Krista Tippett, from the podcast On Being, formerly Speaking of Faith, always begins her conversations by asking guests whether there was a religious or spiritual background to your childhood. However, how you would see that now or define it.
Yeah, so I was, my grandfather was a minister, a Baptist minister, who spent a career traveling the country, ministering the Christian faith. And so we spent quite a while when I was growing up, attending church on Sundays and listening to my grandfather preach. And so it was kind of one of those things where I grew up in it.
Great. I'm pretty sure Randy's going to wish you were holding that mic a little closer to your mouth. It's one of those kind of mics, if you can. Thanks. Several of the readings today were about community. We here call ourselves the Unitarian Universalist Community of Cambria. You're the general manager of the Cambria Community Services District. How do you define community, and what does it mean to you as an individual and as a public service professional?
So I started my career in Cambria in 2008 as a paramedic, a part-time paramedic after finishing Cuesta College. And that's where I started to really develop that sense of community, is in this small area where it's such a small and tight-knit community. And then I got to go out and actually serve the public and serve those that were having maybe some of their worst days. And so that's where I really started to feel interconnected with the community. And that's really where my public service career began, is actually serving others. And so that sense of community is not only serving others, but listening. And that'll transition, I'm sure, into some of the questions later on about that sense of community, but actually being able to listen to others, empathize with others, those differentiating views about things that go on in our community. That's really where my sense of community came from, is through service.
Yeah, and as you heard in our affirmation, service is important to us, as is listening. We appreciate both of those things, so good answer. And kind of to that effect, you trained and spent time as an EMT, an emergency medical technician, work that requires so much emotional strength, compassion and empathy, along with tremendous skill. Would you tell us something about the spiritual side of helping people in need of medical assistance?
Yeah, so, before I started my EMT career before my daughter was born. And so I think there's a significant change once you have a child. So as I began to serve and work as an EMT in the community, some of the things that I grew up seeing as a kid, whether it's movies, the trauma that you see in television and in life, gets glorified, but there's a veil that's over your head until you see that in reality, if that makes sense. So I became a different person, and the world was no longer the same world I lived in once I started working in emergency services. You just see things that are truly tragic and awful. And then when you have a child of your own, that veil gets pulled away from your head. And so now you know what is out there and what the world is, and what can happen to your loved ones and to your family members. And so that changed my perspective on everything. My oldest daughter now is 18, behind the wheel of a car, driving around these towns where I've been on many different accidents. And so the term helicopter parents, I'm a helicopter dad. My wife is a helicopter mom, because my wife is also a nurse. And so there's just certain things that I've seen now that have just changed my perspective on life, if that makes sense. And so while I love to serve the community, I also know how vulnerable we are.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned to you when we first met, having broken my wrist on the tennis courts a couple of years ago, EMT was a miracle. As a matter of fact, Randy drove me to the guys, and they said something like, "We're the people you don't want to meet except on your worst day."
Mm-hmm.
But on your worst day, you are so appreciative, and I really was. They were great human beings in every way, including that skill set. The wrist is all better now. We at UUCC are very proud of our scholarship program, which you heard Jan refer to a few minutes ago. UUs are rather passionate about education, the importance of it. You have kids in school right now. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on education and how your experience as a teacher guided you in your current position in life?
Absolutely. So I grew up middle class. My mother and father married at a very young age, 20 and 21. They started their college careers at a junior college, and then life got in the way. 2 kids. My father worked for UPS for 27 years, never got to finish his educational journey. Mom had to go to work. They had bills to pay and kids to raise. And so their sacrifice for my sister and I always resonated with me. My father, who also taught me to drive and encouraged me to get my first job at 14 to save up for my own pickup, would always talk to me about that educational journey and how, a bachelor's degree at that time for him would equate to a master's degree now, and so on. And so I always was chasing education almost to honor my parents. I was not the greatest student in high school. I was a bit of a knucklehead. But that drive and that grind to continue my education was just always there. I felt I owed it to my parents. I didn't know exactly where it would take me. I just knew I wanted it. I wanted that bachelor's degree to start a career, and I was going to chase a master's degree. I got my master's degree, and I was like, well, might as well look at getting a doctorate, because I did want to go into education and teach eventually. And most of this I did when I was in the fire service. I had a couple knee injuries, which weren't going to allow me to continue the fire career as long as I wanted. And lo and behold, the education worked out, because I was hired at a community college teaching EMTs and paramedics. And so it's such a valuable, I think it's such a valuable piece that I think is being lost, maybe with some oversaturation of degrees and things of that nature. And there's some differentiating views on how important education is. But it changed my life indefinitely. I wouldn't be sitting here without it.
Maybe we'll get to questions about school board and school policy, but that's a little bit on the political side.
It's a hot topic right now.
Yes, it is. Well, let's go there.
Let's go there. Yeah.
Even just our county has the full range of philosophies on that. What are your thoughts?
Locally?
Sure. Yeah, let's keep it local.
Okay. I know Cambria is small and it struggles with its population. Now, are we talking about some of the CCSD school district things?
Yeah, how the CCSD relates to the school district here, and then in general, let's go to, if you go to the county, there's a broader spectrum, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
I think as Cambria, we are a tourist town that has a smaller demographic of children, and that we maybe aren't catering to all of their needs from a CCSD perspective. Our parks and recs and open space, I would say, is a little more geared towards our older community members, and so there's a piece there that's lacking. So for us as the CCSD, we've been working with Skate Cambria on creating some more youth-centered attractions. If anybody's been paying attention to the skate park, I think that's a huge step forward to honoring and serving some of our youth. We do have beautiful walking trails, we have a beautiful beach, but there are a certain amount of areas that cater to our youth. And so I think that's important.
I'll jump ahead to a question, I think it's further down the line, but our congregation skews towards the more mature. So in my experience, does Cambria, and I think the population of the school district is actually declining as an indication of that. What is the CCSD thinking about how to broaden the demographics of the community so that we have more young people moving in and so that Cambria can continue?
I think the skate park is one way to do that. I think the skate park, creating an environment that would attract families to move to Cambria and raise a family here. As a father of four, who's all four children have been involved and still involved in sports, that's a big part of it, I think, is the activities. And so, how can we promote activities within the community that will attract young families to raise children here? For instance, my son just finished his basketball tournament, in Arroyo Grande. They're all in club sports and things of that nature. And so, in a small community like this, how do you promote that type of environment? I'm sure a lot of our children travel south, into Morro Bay and San Luis to have those types of activities. So I think the skate park is one way to do that. I think maybe working with the school district on other activities and sports might help. Right now we have a struggling facilities and resources and parks and open space department in terms of funding, but I think that's something that should be a vision long range, is how are we going to support the youth of the community?
Okay, we need a lot of good people working in all levels of government, from local to federal, people like Don Howell and yourself. You made the transition to a career in government, and I'm curious if you could tell us about the process you've experienced making that transition and what it feels like.
Yeah, it's a a bit of a wild ride to be where I am now compared to where I started. Again, I started on the ground level as a paramedic and a firefighter, and serving at the very ground level. It's government, but you're not working in higher end government in terms of. I wasn't in a leadership position. I was in a leadership position on a fire engine. But as I continued that career and started working on my education, I had an opportunity to go and teach, at the academic level, at a community college level. And I rose through the ranks there in terms of leadership and finding new and innovative ways to teach EMS education during COVID. I became a president of an association that took community college across the state and came together to try to find best practices for teaching EMTs and paramedics. While I was doing that, I was nudged in the direction of the CCSD because I had worked as a part-time firefighter here, part-time paramedic. There was a position open as a general manager. I had met some of our community members, board members. They encouraged me to apply. I didn't have a lot of experience in a community service district or even in administration in other local governments, but I worked in administration from an academic setting. It's not a usual transition from academic leadership into a community service district, but I had my doctorate in public administration, so there's some educational background where I could close some of those gaps. And then my perspective coming into the CCSD was more of a culture and leadership change through communication and transparency. And I've always been good at communicating. I've always been good at talking to the public, working with the public. And so I think there was a shift from your traditional paradigm of coming up, whether it was a utilities manager or a finance manager coming up to the top. I came from with a whole new view on how to run our community service district through communication and utilizing the strengths we had already within the organization. So we have a strong finance manager, utilities manager, we have a great fire department, great fire chief. And so I let them do their job and empower them to do their job. And then I take it from a higher perspective on sitting with the community and letting them ask the hard questions and answer them.
You've been holding court, I don't mean to say that, I don't know what to call it.
Feels like
At
it.
the Vets Hall, you announce in Nextdoor and online that you'll be open for visitors. Long days also. When do you go? What are the hours?
We typically go from about 8:30 in the morning till about 7 at night.
That's a marathon.
Yes.
So you've done that multiple times at this point.
We have another one tomorrow. That one I'm cutting short because I had an MRI on my shoulder and I get to go find out the results.
Oh, join the club.
War wounds. Yeah. So that one ends tomorrow at 1, but typically they're almost all day.
Right. And so there must be some stories that you've got at this point from those. Can you share with us what that's been like?
Yes, we have some very passionate community members. And despite my efforts with my community letters that I send out every Friday evening to every other Friday evening, which is kind of like a community letter blast out that lets the community know everything we're working on, every project. And as we know, we have a lot of projects in Cambria that have either been stagnant or seem to be taking a while. So when I go to the Vets Hall, it's just an open forum for the community members to kind of just let me have it. And so what I try to do is listen. It's important that the community members are heard. And I think that's what Cambria has struggled with, is that, besides the board of directors and public comment, where's the forum for them to be heard openly with no 3-minute time limit that you'll see at a board meeting. And so I'll sit there, for hours listening to the different opinions on how the district should be run, or, what's going on with this project or that project. And I'm able to give them, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, on what we're doing, and dispel a lot of myths and misnomers on how we're conducting ourselves. And so it's been great. I've met a lot of good people. We don't always see eye to eye. There's some passionate community members that feel we should be heading in one direction, and our board, who directs me, I have 5 bosses that direct me through our strategic plan and everything else. I try to explain the position that we're taking and why we're heading that way. And even though we disagree, those that I disagree with or have a fundamental disagreement with the district's direction, they still come back. They still come back and sit down and have coffee and ask questions. And so Mr. Howell comes quite often. We see eye to eye. I didn't mean that, Don, but we have great dialogue and great communication, and so it's really been working out.
That's great. And before I get you back on the democratic issue of working with the board, you meet with individuals, and I imagine a lot of politicians. Do you consider yourself a politician?
I didn't think I was a politician until I realized how much politics are actually involved in running a district.
Right.
And so I would say that I am a politician in a sense.
So I imagine a lot of politicians who start, say, at the CCSD level, in a community, moving on the way up, move on the way up, and at some point they miss the ability to do what you do on days like tomorrow, talking to individuals, because it just gets bigger and bigger, the scale of who you represent. Are you thinking of any future political elevation?
No.
You're young, you're handsome, you could go there.
The attention I've gotten just from Cambria recently is enough. It's enough. But I like serving on the ground floor, so to speak. Even though higher up in the administration, I still can go out there and work with the community and work with my staff. And so, there's so much that we still have to get accomplished and see through that I don't know if politics long range is in my future.
I assume you've met the San Luis Obispo County Board.
Mm-hmm.
Have you met Congress people and
I have.
senators?
Mm-hmm. I have, yeah. So, we stay close with, Don Addis and Panetta, and then obviously Bruce Gibson. And so, we try to reach out with some of those higher level politicians to voice some of our concerns in Cambria. As a community service district, we're kind of isolated from a lot of that support. We're not a incorporated city. We're not a part, of the county necessarily. We've got our own little island here. So funding can be challenging. And so you reach out to them to see if there's other sources of funding outside of our revenue.
Does your job include going up to Sacramento at all?
Not too much.
No,
not too
I
much.
guess that would be at the most, it would be the county board.
But through the Community Service District Association, there's a lot of courses that will go to Sacramento. I was just at a conference down south, and that's a lot of different special districts coming together and doing training and finding out, best practices and things of that nature. So I do travel quite a bit that way in terms of working with other community service districts and finding out what their struggles are and telling them, what our struggles are and how they navigate those.
It sounds like a pretty cool job.
I do. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. So democracy and working with the board, the CCSD board, 5 members, as I said in my civics lesson. And indeed, they're your bosses, and you, whether you agree with them or not, your job is to execute their decisions.
Correct.
That's democracy. Tell us about that. How does it feel? How does it work?
Our board right now is phenomenal. Differences of opinions, obviously on various different issues, but they work really, really well together. And so we just recently had our strategic planning. And so the board came together with staff and we talk about our long range goals, our 5-year goals. We had a minor update recently, but we all talk about how we can achieve those goals and achieve that mission. And so working with the board, I communicate with them, obviously the president on a weekly basis, but we have what's called board walks. So before every single board meeting, I spend a half an hour to an hour. It's usually a half an hour that turns into an hour, right, Don? And then you spend an hour going over the board agenda, and you start engaging in all the dialogue and all the different staff projects, policies that we're looking to push forward. And it's been great. It really has. The board truly cares about Cambria, truly cares about accomplishing some of these goals. I think, unless you're talking to the board, you don't understand all the things that go on in the background just to get things accomplished, and so it's been great. Obviously, I have to navigate as a staff member, navigate the different visions of the individual board members, because obviously there are sometimes opposing views, but that's what they deal with at the board level when they're navigating votes on moving a specific project forward or approving, a policy or a policy direction. So what I do is kind of facilitate, and in a way, I'm a diplomat between the different board members to try to get them to understand maybe what staff's trying to do, incorporate their feedback, and then execute.
So do you advise them? Are you an advisor? Do they turn to you for whatever expertise or whatever learning you have had on a particular topic?
Yeah, I think I have to advise them because we're on the ground floor, and there's such a disconnect between all of the things that staff has to do. The WRF, right? The Water Reclamation Facility and the permitting and the Coastal Commission. There are so many different things that are going on just for that permit between staff, consultants, the county, the Coastal Commission, that a board member is not a part of those discussions. And so when you go in and you're trying to explain, okay, this is the direction we're trying to head as staff, there's a huge information gap that has to be filled between you and that individual board member. And so you have to advise them on everything that's going on in that direction that you're heading. And so you try to do that when those agenda items come, or when the board member may stop by the Vets Hall tomorrow, and ask questions and engage in dialogue with the community and staff. So those community letters that I send out every couple of weeks is another way of informing the board, because staff spends so much time on the ground level. If I compile everything that we've done in the last 2 weeks and I blast that out on a Friday evening, the board member gets it as well and gets to read it, and then they become more informed. And then if they have questions during our board walks, they'll fire away. So
you compose those weekly letters without their approval. You put it out there and then they comment on it if they
do. Yeah. There's a couple
sometimes?
times where I've had a board member go, I think you're saying too much, so, and other board members really like it. And it's the same with the community. Some community members think that it's just too much. It needs to be scaled down. And then other community members love it because it's really in depth. So the board member will come and have an opinion on, what I'm writing about and ask for clarification, but they haven't really ever told me to not do it. It was one of the things that actually lobby for myself when I came in as to apply for the general manager position is I recognized and identified gaps in that communication. And we've heard the word transparency, I'm sure, quite a bit in Cambria. And so that was my vision on how to be more transparent, is to put it all out there, and do that every 2 weeks on Fridays.
Back to democracy, who literally manages our local elections, the election of the board members, any proposals that go onto a ballot? Does the CCSD manage that, or is there a different body?
No, we manage that. You know, we're the ones that set up the elections and pay for the elections. You know, obviously those that are running for the board, you know, they have their own campaigns and pay for that. But the CCSD is the one that organizes those.
And how's voter turnout here in Cambria?
You know, I haven't been here because I was hired. Let me remember. I got hired last year, which was April, and then the board stayed the same, right? There was no elections.
Yeah, we didn't have a local
Yeah.
issue on the board, on the ballot.
My understanding is voter turnout is pretty good in Cambria. We'll find out this November because we have three seats open.
Oh, okay, that'll be a much bigger one then.
Mm-hmm.
My last question, we have a variety of religious communities here in Cambria, quite a few for a small town. How much do they influence CCSD policy? Are they a lobby, I guess you could call it? Do you have thoughts on how faith-based organizations such as ours can influence and participate in CCSD activities?
I think first and foremost, it's showing up to board meetings. I think that our faith-based organizations are a snapshot of our overall community. As far as policy setting, that's at the board level. You know, we have policies at the CCSD level in terms of staff policies. I try to, you know, when we take a look at those policies, I try to look at, you know, the most equitable way to identify policies and enforce policies from a board perspective. I really feel that they are a snapshot of the community. And so I think our faith-based organizations should show up to board meetings and be heard. And our board is pretty good at listening and letting that guide and drive our mission. I think a lot of our strategic plan incorporates a lot of what our faith-based organizations envision or vision of Cambria should be. And so they're pretty in tune to that.
No pressure, but what did you think about our little service this
I loved
morning?
it. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was a more of a holistic approach, you know, having grown up Baptist. My wife is Catholic, so that's a unique, you know, there's some differences there in the way that we were raised, but we incorporate that into the way that we're raising our children. And I think if you take a look at my grandfather, who is a minister, a Baptist minister, I think religion has evolved, because I think if you were to take a look at my grandfather's beliefs 50, 60 years ago, don't necessarily align with what our country is embracing in terms of inclusion. So I think this organization having a very holistic view and honoring everybody's beliefs for one common good is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, we are, as with all religions, we're in a state of transition. We, not this congregation, but the umbrella organization called the Unitarian Universalist Association is in the process of rewriting our fundamental policies, including the 7 principles that you were familiar with and that we alluded to today, are transitioning to something new and more modern, and that's a big thing that we're going through, so we understand. Do you have any words that or any statement you like to make to groups that I haven't touched on or that you haven't had a chance to make before we wrap this up?
Only to come down to the Vets Hall. Come down and sit down and have a conversation. I know there's a lot of questions about things that are going on with the CCSD, whether it has to do with the SR4 well at the high school and some of those negotiations, whether it's the water reclamation facility, the coastal commission, water, no water. If you have the questions, come down and sit down and talk, and I'll give you about as much information as I have and can give legally. You know, I have a lot of conversations with our lawyers, so there's some things I can't talk about, but I'm pretty much an open book. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it. But I think if there's questions about the way that our district is running, the things that we're doing within the district, you read a news article, come sit down with the Vets Hall. We have coffee, cookies, you name it, we're there for all day. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for that invitation. That's very kind, and I recommend you take advantage of it. I think I'll be there more than I have been in the past, now that I've gotten to know you a little bit. Thank you so much, General Manager McElheine. Thank you. The morning offering will now be given and received. Please remember, we are a self-sustaining congregation and provide all financial resources for our many ministries. We recognize the spiritual value of generosity and invite you to participate. If you're viewing this remotely, please use one of the methods shown on the screen. Thank you. Thank you, Jan. Our thanks for all the gifts given and received for the work of this community. Please stand in body or spirit and sing our closing hymn, number 1023, Building Bridges.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmonies. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmonies. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony. That's called a Picardy third.
As we prepare to extinguish the chalice, let us recite the valediction. We have basked in this warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, we carry its glow onward. Let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond. Please extinguish your chalice at home now. Let's form a circle and join hands for the closing words. Matthew, if you would, please.
Oh, sorry. Ready? All right. I wrote a little something here. Life is a masterful teacher, presenting us with an array of lessons crafted with precision and purpose. I have had quite the life, but the fact that there's a highway to hell and only one stairway to heaven says a lot about the anticipated numbers, traffic numbers. Yet I've learned when you throw mud, you lose ground. Life lessons are not confined to moments of hardship alone. They also manifest in moments of joy, love, and connection. It is the embrace of loved ones, the beauty of nature, and the laughter of a child that we find solace and meaning. I've grown and learned that if you are more fortunate than others, build a longer table, not a taller fence. Lastly, please help us to be the people our dogs think we are.